Hello, this is the Truth Seeker. This video continues my general response to the claims that Judaism was ripped off from Canaanite religious ideas. This is an idea which is an overgeneralization on many levels. At some point down the line, I may do a whole video series on the claim that the Hebrews were quote-unquote Canaanite, but that is yet another long and exhausting topic which I'm only touching on a very little bit in this series. At this point in this video series on the quote-unquote Council of the Gods, you might be wondering when I'm going to actually talk about this quote-unquote council. Well, I will eventually get to that topic, but it is still necessary that foundational concepts as well as cultural context be understood. So most of this video series is about understanding the Hebrew names for God, as well as some of the gods' names in the Ugaritic Canaanite culture. Now, my views are a conservative response to a topic which is dominated by liberal scholarship. So it is necessary to understand the conservative approach to all of the words and topics involved. Why such a focus on each word? Because the liberal and the conservative speak different languages, despite their use of the same words and phrases. The focus on word meanings is so that the liberal mind can be revealed in the light of conservative explanations. So, moving on to a basic overview, in this video we're going to be delving into the name, the primary name of God, the Tetragrammaton, which is spelled in the Hebrew Yod, He, Vav, He. So I've drawn up a little chart showing the basics to give an overview of this name. Now, so what we have here is the transliteration or representation in English on the first column, which I've listed in capitals, Lord. Also, we see the term Yahweh. And then, of course, in the Hebrew, both of those are represented by the same Hebrew characters. The English alphas of the Hebrew letters, okay? In regard to the English, it's not applicable, but in regard to the name Yahweh, it is listed as a YHWH. But when we look at the name Jehovah in the English transliteration, the English alphas are listed as a YHVH. And so there's two different camps in regard to the Vav character, or shall I say Vav or Wa character. Now, in regard to both of those various Hebrew transliterations, Yahweh and Jehovah, the Yod, the Hebrew character Yod, of course, for the Yahweh is a Y pronunciation. It's Yah, okay? But in the case of Jehovah, the Yod transliteration is being pronounced as a J character, Jah, okay? And so there's two different camps in regard to the Yod character, okay? But the majority of scholarship is pretty much in agreement that the Yod character is the Y sound, the Yah sound, while a small portion of the scholarly or alternative communities prefer the J sound over the Y sound. And then, of course, getting back to the last column in our table, we have the Vav or the Wa preference in regard to the name. So, right off the bat, just in the pronunciation of the name of God, there's disagreement on the sounds of the letters, okay? Now, I'd like to read to you a little bit of an article from the Jewish Virtual Library, and it's entitled Jewish Concepts, the Name of God. And the very first part of the article states, please note, this page contains the name of God. If you print it out, please treat it with appropriate respect, okay? So, just from out of the starting gate, you have to come to the realization of the Jewish respect for the name of God. The first section in this article is entitled The Significance of Names. And here's the content. In Jewish thought, a name is not merely an arbitrary designation, a random combination of sounds. The name conveys the nature and essence of the thing named. It represents the history and reputation of the being named. This is not as strange or unfamiliar a concept as it may seem at first glance. In English, we often refer to a person's reputation as his good name. When a company is sold, one thing that may be sold is the company's goodwill. That is, the right to use the company's name. The Hebrew concept of a name is very similar to these ideas. An example of this usage occurs in Exodus chapter 3, verses 13 through 22. Moses asks God what his quote-unquote name is. Moses is not asking God, what should I call you? Rather, he's asking, who are you? What are you like? What have you done? That is clear from God's response. God replies that he is eternal, that he is the God of our ancestors, that he has seen our affliction and will redeem us from bondage. Another example of this usage is the concepts of Chilu Hashem and Kadush Hashem. An act that causes God or Judaism to come into disrespect or a commandment to be disobeyed is often referred to as Chilul Hashem, profanation of the name. Clearly, we're not talking about a harm done to a word. We are talking about harm to a reputation. Likewise, any deed that increases the respect accorded to God or Judaism is referred to as Kadush Hashem, sanctification of the name. Because a name represents the reputation of the thing named, a name should be treated with the same respect as the thing's reputation. For this reason, God's names in all their forms are treated with enormous respect and reverence in Judaism. Okay, so that's just a little snippet out of that article, which has a lot more content, and I've listed the link here if you'd like to read more. But as a side note, regarding the names of God, the name Yahweh happens to be the most popular used scholarly reference to the name of God. Now, I may have to do another video series just on that topic alone, as it is a widespread issue for all of its own other reasons. And most of the issue is with regard to the quote-unquote Wah, or rather what I believe to be more correctly pronounced Vav. Okay? So, moving on to the meaning of the name of God. The name is most popular related to the Hebrew verb be, which is Hayah. But this cannot be established with absolute certainty, which I will explain later. For now, let's look at the reasons why veh-eh-heh-yeh is thought to be related to the verb be. This is because in Exodus chapter 3, God tells Moses to refer to him as I am, or as also translated, I will be. Now here's the context of the passage of Exodus. Exodus chapter 3, verses 13 through 15. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say to them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you. And they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And God said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. In looking at just the Hebrew of verse 14, it reads Vayomer Elohim El Moshe EHYH Asher EHYH Vayomer Ki Tomar Lebni Yisrael EHYH Shalachni Elohim. Notice the word for I am in Hebrew. It is pronounced EHYH. The signifies I, and the Hayah is the verb for be. The word in between is asher, translated as that. Hence the popular translation, I am that I am. The phrase in verse 14 is translated many different ways due to the Hebrew tenses. Being as simple as they are, in Hebrew there are only two tenses. There is the perfect tense and the imperfect tense. Perfect tenses communicate a completion of an action. Imperfect tenses communicate open or in-process actions. The word in verse 14 is in the imperfect verb form, so that leaves the interpretation open to a variety of possibilities. Setting aside the translation of I am that I am, it is not entirely clear from the Bible passage how EHYH is an aspect of the title Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now, don't get me wrong. The title EHYH is a name of the Lord, but it is not fully apparent how it is related to the spelling of his primary name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. In order to understand the confusion with regard to EHYH being related to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, we will need to study the parts of the name as well as examine the various forms of the verb Hayah. Now, here's an article by Dr. Andrew Sargent on the same issue, discussing the meaning of the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And I'll just read a little bit of it, maybe skim it a little bit. The title of the article is Psst. Yahweh doesn't mean I am. Okay. So what he goes into is the text of what I just wrote here, and then he goes on to state in about the fourth paragraph, the mistake is easily solved. The true meaning of Yud-Heh, and he uses a W here, Yud-Heh-Wah-Heh, is not I am. We have three names in a row. We have I am who I am, that's one. And the other one is I am, just by itself. And then we have Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So we have the three titles. Now, you don't have to know Hebrew to see the change between the two I am lines and the Lord line. Hebrew goes from right to left, so you can see that the I am lines begin with the aleph, which marks one type of the first person, I, and that the Lord line begins with a yod, which marks one type of a third person verb, he, which is what most, let me just break in the reading the article here. Most scholars would speculate that the yod in veh-eh-heh-yeh does stand for the pronoun he, so that is a possibility. Now, getting back to this article here, he says, given that each of the names is based on the common verb Hayah, to be, the name YHYH is some version of he is. Okay? So what do you mean, some version of? Good question. So he goes on, and in conclusion, states, then in my odd biblical scholar self, I love the idea of a grand declaration of an ultimate being, the time existence that stands opposed to the fictions of pagan worship, swirling around a dedication to carvings and demons who tremble before he who is. Then let's face the facts. Self recognizes the likelihood of Yahweh, the creator of all, the source of all, the beginning and end of it all, which ain't too shabby neither. So, all this to say, he goes through the variants, and he is stating that yes, it's most likely related to the verb Hayah, but there's still some question as to the exact meaning of what that form of the name YHWH really actually, the understanding of it, but is tied up in that verb. But so let's move on. If you're interested in that article, I'll post that link as well. So what about the letters of the name YHWH? If the Hebrew verb Hayah is related to the name YHWH, then it should be helpful to compare the letters of each word to each other to see if we can discern a pattern of relation between the two words. The first part of YHWH is the Y and the H, the Yah or Yah. I suppose the speculation is that the verb Hayah has dropped the first H and has been shortened to Yah. This is a guess, based on commonly accepted relation to the verb Hayah. But, Yah is thought by a majority of scholars and believers to be most likely the shortened form of the word or the name Yahweh or YHWH. So this brings up questions on which came first. Did Yah come first and later become YHWH? Or did the name YHWH come first and then the shortened poetic form Yah come later? Now the answer most accepted is that Yah is clearly the poetic shortened form of YHWH, because it's only used 48 times in the Bible, while YHWH is used 6,519 times in the Bible. Now, every occurrence of Yah, those 48 occurrences, if you look at them all, they're used in a poetic fashion, in poetry. So moving back to the topic of comparing the first person verb form of Hayah and the name Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh, when we look at them side by side, it's hard to see a relationship. Now here's a chart which sets EHYH and Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh next to each other. Here we have the English transliteration, which I'm listing as EHYH, EHYH, and then the English transliteration of Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh, YHVH. Now phonetically, we have here the written form, EHYH, but in regard to the name Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh, we have an unknown pronunciation, or a pronunciation that is so sacred it's not shared with the masses. It's the ineffable name, unspeakable. So what does it sound like? We don't know. A lot of people can speculate of what it sounded like. And there's lots and lots of people stating that they know what the name sounds like. But I can guarantee you the one thing we do know is that the characters are Yud, He, Vav, He. And that's about the most certain thing that we can know about the name. So the letters of EHYH are Aleph, He, Yod, He. The letters of the name of God are Yud, He, Vav, He. And this is the Hebrew of what it looks like in Hebrew, reading from left to right. On the top, EHYH, Aleph, He, Yod, He. And then here on the bottom, the Hebrew for the name of God, Yud, He, Vav, He. Okay, just so that you can kind of see it with your eyes and get a feel of what the two words look like and how are they related to each other. So in Hebrew there are grammar rules which allow for certain letters to be dropped from the beginning of a word or the ending. There are, of course, some words in Hebrew where we simply have not figured out the actual root of the word. We have the same issue in the English language. Some words we have lost the understanding of its root or origin. Now, this seems to be the case when it comes to the name of the Lord. There are speculations, but nothing that we can state with full certainty regarding the four letters Yud, He, Vav, He. Now, the patterns of the two EHYH and Yud, Vav, He, they share the two He's, separated by another character, but not the same character. The character which separates the He's in Hayah is Yod, while the character which stands in the middle of the He's in the name of God is the vav. Now the vav can be looked at as a connecting symbol. So we are inclined to see that element, which is Yah, Yod, He, being connected with the He character. But if so, the Yah no longer seems to be derived from a supposed root of Hayah. So I'll get into explaining that a little bit clearer. But as stated, there is much to question, but nothing that I can state with certainty regarding the elements of the name YHWH. So what about the verb Hayah? Perhaps we might be able to see some patterns within the verb forms of Hayah, which might give us a lead in possibly trying to connect the verb with the name YHWH. So there's websites. Here's one here that shows you some of the verbs of Hayah, and you've got I will be, you will be. Another that's masculine, you will be. Feminine, you will be. He or it will be. She, it will be. So on and so forth. Looking at the first one, it's the familiar one that we've read in our chapter, EHYH. I will be. You will be. T-he-yeh. That's the masculine. The feminine, T-he-yeh. He or it will be. Yeh-he-yeh. See, it's interesting there. Now let's take a look at another website here. Here's a Wikipedia of the verb forms. You can see past tense, future tense. Okay, so if you're interested, I'll leave that link in the description. So, in looking those over, the closest resemblance to YHWH is the future tense verb form with the masculine singular, which means he will be. And it's YHWH, he will be. And it's spelled Yod, He, Yud, He. Okay. So the only character differentiating that from the name of God would be the Yud in the middle, as opposed to the Vav. So that's what becomes apparent, is that the only pattern of letters slightly resembling the name of the Lord are the two He's that have the name, that in the name YHWH is the Vav in between the He's, while the verb Hayah, it is the Yod between the He's. Now, if the name YHWH is related to Hayah, then which part of the name is representative of the root of the verb? Since the root in Hebrew is Hayah, He Yod He, we are led to look at the two letters Yod and He, which are the last two letters of the verb. But we are forced to drop the first H, the first He. So in the name of God, what about the veh-eh-heh-yeh? How do we explain that? And if the yod is signifying the masculine singular, then if the hey in hey yod hey is being dropped from Hayah, then how do we attribute the yod as relating to Hayah in the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh? Let me explain this another way. Below I have the verb Hayah above the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, showing the speculative dropped H from Hayah in the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And I've lined up the heys and the yods and the heys, and then we have nothing to line up for the vav and the hey in the very end of the name here. So the top word being the verb to be, the bottom being the name of God. Now here's my observations. The yod in this root of the verb to be does not signify the masculine singular. But in the name of God, the yod in this speculation is thought to represent the masculine singular. So, what is it? Is the yod part of the verb Hayah, or is the yod representative of the masculine singular? You can start to see where this gets confusing. Now let's consider the future tense of Hayah. We have EHYH, which is he will be, which is the future tense of masculine singular of the verb Hayah. Now, my observation. The first yod in this instance is representative of the singular masculine, but the second yod is simply part of the Hebrew root, Hayah. Okay? So, when we're looking at the name of God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and the first yod is speculated to represent the singular masculine, but what does the vav represent? Furthermore, what does the last hey represent? Okay? So now that we've looked at these charts, we can more fully understand the mystery of the first yod in the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. How could that yod represent the singular masculine of the verb Hayah if we are speculating that the yod itself is part of the root verb Hayah? Now, do not misunderstand me. I am not saying that the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is not related to the Hebrew verb Hayah. What I am saying is that it is not as cut and dry a case when trying to show the relationship of the verb to the name. For now, we must consider that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is a name, and that as a name, it is unique from other words and grammar rules. So for us to try to understand how the name developed could just be an exercise in futility. Now, all of this to show you what we currently know about the name YHWH and to understand the Hebrew worldview regarding the name. It is important to understand all of these things because it gives us a foundation to draw from when we are confronted with a hypercritical claim that the name YHWH was developed from the pagan Canaanite culture. Now that we have looked at that general pattern and the makeup of the name, I would like to take a closer look at each letter. So it can be helpful sometimes to consider the meanings of the ancient pictographs from either what could be parallel languages to the paleo Hebrew. Here is a site which discusses these pictographs. So let's take a look at the chart of the Hebrew pictographs and take a look at the meaning and the picture of each pictograph, and then we can speculate what each letter represents. So the first letter in the name of God is Yod, and you can see that it is a symbol of an arm and a closed hand. And here is the pictographs of the Yod and how it has developed through different languages. The first pictograph looks a lot like an arm with an open hand. And it can mean work, it can mean throw, it can mean worship. It definitely can mean hand, or it can mean arm. Now, looking at the second letter in the name of God, which is Hey, we see that the picture is the man with raised arms. And the first pictograph clearly looks like a man who is raising his arms, and you can see how the character developed. Now, they've got this listed as early, middle, and late. So the earliest pictographs looking in this manner, from left to right. The picture, man raised with arms, meaning, it could mean look, it could mean reveal, it can mean breath, and obviously it can mean something related to a man with his arms raised. So there's that. And then we have the vav, or the wa character. And you can see that the meaning is a tent peg, and if you look at the early character pictograph, it looks like a peg of some sort. And this is actually the word that they used when they were using tent pegs in the wilderness in the Bible to put together the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. And so the vav is used in that instance. And so the meaning can mean add, secure, hook. And the vav is a very significant letter in the Hebrew language because it means and so it's always adding to the thought. It also starts a sentence with "and he said," "vayomer," which is a very common phrase in the Hebrew. So So we see that that character can be used to bring ideas together, one idea with another idea. And then, of course, we have the He, which is the man with the arms raised. So looking at all of the pictographs together, we could speculate a lot of different things about what the name of God could possibly mean with regard to these pictographs. Okay. Now, of course, like I said, as languages develop, things change meaning, and so this is not a code or a cipher that gives us an insight into what it actually means, but maybe this gives us a hint as to what these characters actually mean and what the word actually means. So perhaps the name YHVH has something to do with worship and the Lord who deserves the highest worship. Again, this is a guess, but as we examine the name, it becomes more apparent how the meaning just eludes us. Another question which arises is the meaning of the vav, which seems to be connecting Yah and He. Does the second He simply stand for something else other than the verb to be? Again, we could ask ourselves, is YHVH actually derived from the verb root Hayah? Well, the only thing we seem to be certain of is that the spelling of the name is Yud-He-Vav-He. Now, how those letters are pronounced, which vowel sounds should be used, and what the root or origin of the name is, that all falls into an area of educated guesses. So, getting back to this passage in Exodus chapter 3, does the Lord say, "Call me veh-eh-heh-yeh," to establish the root of his title name, Yud-He-Vav-He? Or can we understand this Bible passage in another light? Well, I don't think we have enough to support. I don't think we have enough support to state that Yud-He-Vav-He is related to the verb Hayah. Does that change how we understand Yud-He-Vav-He to be? No. Do we still know that Yud-He-Vav-He is the eternally existent one? Yes, we do. Was the name Yud-He-Vav-He derived from veh-eh-heh-yeh? I don't know. How else can we understand veh-eh-heh-yeh? Well, before the verb form was used in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, that word, that particular formation of that word, made its first appearance in Genesis chapter 26, verse 3. So the key verse we're looking at now is Genesis chapter 26, verse 3, as God is speaking to Isaac, and he states, "Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you, and will bless you. For to you and your offspring I will give these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father." So note the use of "and I will be." This is, in Hebrew, veh-eh-heh-yeh. And it starts with the vav, which is the connecting character, and it is concluded with ehyeh, I will be. Veh-eh-heh-yeh, and I will be. And this is the first occurrence in the book of Genesis that this form of the verb appears. And I have a link here to Scholar's Gateway, which you can look at, and shows you where the first occurrence actually occurs. But as a side note, note the relation to the very promises which God made to Isaac and to Abraham and to Jacob regarding the land and their ancestors. Later, when Moses asks the Lord, which name should he give the Israelites, God states, tell them that Yahweh has sent you to them. This seems to clearly allude to the promises God made to Isaac and also to Abraham and Jacob. So I am of the persuasion that while Yahweh is translated as I am, that the primary understanding is I will be with you, which is implied by the promise in Genesis 26, verse 3. As with most Hebrew words, they can mean many things which are relatively saying similar things from different perspectives. So Yahweh in this instance can mean I am, eternally existent. I am with you, implied. I will be, eternally existent. Or I will be with you, implied. So, just also as a side note, another side note, Jesus states a very similar phrase in the last words of the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter 28, verse 20. It states, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. So, again, it sounds like Jesus is referencing the idea of Exodus, or the idea of Genesis chapter 26, verse 3, in stating, I will be with you. Now the question, what is God's name? What is his name? When Moses states in Exodus chapter 3, verse 13, when they ask me, what is his name? What should I say to them? It's not merely an inquiry as to the Lord's correctly pronounced name. It is a question about who God is to Israel. The question is not merely answered by stating God's name, but by communicating who God is. It wasn't about a certain name pronunciation that if Moses didn't speak correctly to Israel, they would turn Moses away. No, it was about Moses speaking of who the Lord was to Israel. This is why God gives Moses several names to give to Israel. In Exodus 3, verse 14, in the first part, he states, EHYH asher EHYH, which is, I am that I am, or I will be that I will be, or I will be what I will be, or I will be with you, implied. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, in the second part, he states, EHYH, which is simply, I am, or I will be. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 15, he states, the Lord, veh-eh-heh-yeh, God of your fathers, which is Elohei Avtechim, the God of Abraham, Elohei Avraham, the God of Isaac, Elohei Yitzchak, and the God of Jacob, veh-eh-heh-yeh Yaakov. Okay, so all the names speak to who he is and his good name, his reputation he established as the God of their fathers. This ends this video, and coming up we'll be getting into further discussion regarding the name YHWH. God bless you all. Keep seeking truth.